we have a great guest with us today, and this is Randy Turner, who is a retired Canadian Special Forces JTF-2 assaulter. And so for the people who don't know you, Randy, please first tell me or tell them a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you've done, and what you're doing now.
Sure. Yeah, so Randy Turner, I've recently retired from the Canadian Armed Forces. Actually, almost a year now I've been retired. So I did 21 years in the Canadian Armed Forces. 16 of those years was with JTF-2 here in Ottawa. And then prior to that, I did almost 6 years with the 2nd Battalion PPCLI. So that was my military career. And during the military career, I also fought professional for about 10 years. So I did some mixed martial arts for about 10 years while I was operating, and then kind of holding down 2 different careers for about 10 years while here in Ottawa. And now that I'm retired, I'm running a business called Direct Action Combat Performance. And that's essentially a business that's situated to provide training and services and consulting for anything that's related to combative self-defense. So it can be a component of mixed martial arts, firearms training, or self-defense or defensive tactics for military, law enforcement, as well as the general public.
Perfect. So that's a great intro about what you've done, some of your experience. So as I told you before, our time is limited, so I'm going to get right to the questions, and then we're going to see where we get to from there. So the first question, Randy, is what is the relevancy of, or the relevance of functional fitness to everyday activity?
So to me, what I perceive to be functional fitness is the ability to move your body well without impingement or, obviously trying to avoid any pain. So to me, functional fitness is a compilation of a couple of things. It's being able to push well, it's being able to move and pull well. A stable element of balance is always important, spatial awareness. And also a big one for me, what I refer to functional fitness is a level of anaerobic threshold power. So being able to exert a certain amount of energy when, there's a moment of stress or duress, and you can actually move your body to either deal with a confrontation or to get yourself into an area of safety. So to me, functional fitness incorporates those key elements where you can push well, you can pull well, you can use your body for some agility, movement patterns, and ultimately have a little bit of a anaerobic threshold capacity.
Excellent. So knowing that now, your definition of functional fitness. So talk to us about your main foundations for strength and conditioning training, and I'm going to say strength and conditioning training when training tactical operators, and then B, when training regular everyday clients.
Right. So for the tactical operator, being able to move well while in balance, both from a point where you need to explode, but also decelerate and change direction. But it's one thing to be able to say, yes, I have good explosive power, and that's fine. So getting out of the threshold, being able to, move from a stop state and get at full speed is good. But there's a big component to that sometimes get missed, and that's the deceleration with an angle change. So being able to control your body, be in balance, and change direction is really, really important. So for the tactical athlete, when I'm training those guys, there's a lot of function and a lot of emphasis put on being able to change direction while under load, because a lot of times these guys are wearing between 55 and maybe 75 pounds of equipment. So being able to control that extra weight while, cutting angles and changing directions is really important to prevent the obvious, which is, blown out knees, blown out ankles, or, upper body, shoulder injuries, stuff like that. So the tactical athlete, for example, may have a different training strategy where the general public the difference is the loads that they're going to be wearing or the strain and stress that's going to be put on them while they're trying to fulfill their everyday duties. So very different from the general public who, maybe it's a school teacher Maybe it's a lawyer or an office worker where the load that is on the individual is going to be considerably different.
Okay, so the goals obviously are different and the requirements are different. But if you think about the principles themselves, do you see the principles, the general principles of training for tactical operators different than those of the general population?
No, not really. I think when creating a program for the general population versus creating a program for a tactical operator or a tactical athlete, the principles are the same. Be able to move well, be able to excel, be able to decelerate while under a level of stress, while also tapping into different energy systems. So I think the principles are relatively in line between a tactical athlete and the general public. Where it differentiates is the volume and the intensity at which they train for the purpose of being prepared to do what they need to do every day, either in their line of work or just in an everyday function. So
Sure.
that's where I think where the principles maybe differ a little bit.
So just and this is I'm just gonna, I guess we guesstimate here, but if you had to guesstimate, when you can compare volumes, okay, of training, and say that civilian is 1x, just out of curiosity, what would you estimate as the volume, comparable volume of training in order to prepare a tactical operator for what they need to do? And I recognize there's different roles, there's assaulter, sniper, whatever, but in general, what would you estimate is the volume, comparative volume?
So what I would see on a regular basis is, assaulters, tactical athlete, their energy output and their level of physical exertion on a day-to-day basis is probably 5 or 6 days of physical output, and maybe one a day and a half of rest where there's no or very little physical exertion on the body. Where that differentiates with the general public is a lot of clients that I'm currently working with, they dedicate to maybe 2 days of training, intense training, some maybe three. So the volume is considerably different, where the general public typically you'll see, they'll train on a Monday, take a Tuesday off, train on a Wednesday, take a Thursday off, and then maybe train again on a Friday. Where a tactical athlete, not only do they put physical strain on themselves to try to better themselves day in and day out, and they're trying to gain that 1% increase on a weekly basis, but in conjunction with that, not only are they putting themselves through those paces, but the job detail is also putting themselves or putting them their by nature of the business, that it's more taxing. So there's more volume that is already placed upon them. So when they are not training in terms of what the job detail requires or from an operational perspective, then they're training to better themselves. So what that equates to is a whole lot of volume in a routine general week.
Mm-hmm. So if you obviously now, when we think about training, we think about having adequate time to rest, to rehabilitate yourself, and to allow yourself to recover from what you're doing.
Yeah.
You have a crap ton of volume and little time to rest and recuperate. So how, obviously, this is part of the job, right? Like you need to do that because there's that much stuff to train, and you need to be the very pointy end of the spear, right? But how do you think that affects the longevity of operators as a whole, given the volume of work that they have to do?
Yeah, and that's the golden question, because a lot of assaulters that I've worked with in the past, they're high performing, type A personalities where they want to get after it day in and day out. And, they're trying to achieve that 1% increase in self-improvement and self-mastery every week, which is awesome. It's a great trait to have, but it's also a double-edged sword, because with that comes, the overuse injuries or the chronic pain that turns into chronic injury that never, I shouldn't say never, but oftentimes gets overlooked or doesn't necessarily get addressed adequately in order for them to think about the long game, in order for them to project what may or may not happen 10 years from now. because a lot of those guys are living in the moment and right on them. You know, they're being where their feet are, and that's important. But in some cases, all it really takes is, you know, a coach or you know, a deck commander or a team leader to say, hey man, like there should be, or there ought to be, a bit of recovery built into the routine schedule, and that may preserve the, you know, the longevity of that individual being operationally effective.
Mm-hmm. And it's, you know, it's funny when I think about any of the special forces guys, whether it's JTF, CSOR, that I have operated on or been involved with their care, or even RCMP TAC guys. As you said, they're type A personalities, man. I don't ever have to motivate them. I'm always having to say, look it, dude, you need to give yourself time to recover from this, and I need to rein them back, pull them back, right? But as you
Yeah.
say, there needs to be some kind of buy-in, some kind of direction from a higher, like, you know, someone up higher up the chain of command, or somebody that is respected within the unit, so that they understand, hey, like, oh yeah, you know what, I got to give myself some time to actually recover. I can't go balls to the wall 100 miles an hour all the time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
but
so
what, no,
in
go ahead.
some cases, yeah, I was just gonna say, I think in some cases, like it would be tough for the upper echelon of the chain of command to kind of suppress those guys, and equally, it's tough for the individual to recognize that he needs to take the foot off the throttle a little bit. But the analogy that I sometimes use with these guys that I used to work with, who I have the utmost respect for, and they're just, you know, beauty human beings. But the analogy that I use sometimes is, think about it like this. If you're a high-end, high-performing race car and you're at a race and you've got the throttle pinned, right, for hours on end, and that race car is revving in the red line the majority of that race, what happens at the end of that race is there's time that is allocated to rebuild the engine. There is time to help rejuvenate what it is that maybe was suboptimal during the race, so that in a week from today, when they
You
need to
can
race
you can do
again,
it again.
the machine is, you know, ready to perform, it's recovered, the ailments have been fixed, and now they can do it again. So I think theoretically guys understand that, and they respect that, and they try to adopt it. The problem is sometimes it's not within the individual, but it's a operational requirement. So either, undermanned, tempo is high based on operations and taskings and whatnot. So in some cases, the guys don't get the adequate rest that they probably need. And it's not because they don't want to, it's just a system, a product of the system, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So one thing that you and I talked about in a previous conversation was, you know, experience. So you were in this for 20 years, right?
Yeah.
21 years.
Yeah.
So experience and what it has taught you about being able to prepare. And we talked a little bit about, you know, working smarter and not necessarily working harder.
Yeah.
So if you were to be, you know, pre-retirement Randy Turner, right, and you're speaking to JTF year one Randy Turner, you know, give us three things in terms of not everything, but three things in terms of fitness and preparation that you would have told yourself looking back.
Probably the first one, I would say, modify the level of intensity each workout. So I'm still guilty of it. I was really guilty of it in my early career, but every workout in my mind I had to be redlining. I had to be high intensity, max output, to the point where, you're seeing stars, and you're just completely, completely spent. So I would say first and foremost, alter that. So in some cases, some workouts, yeah, absolutely. You need to push that threshold and reach the red line and, be in 190, 195 beats per minute, but not every workout. Sometimes it behooves the individual to, have something that's a little bit more steady state, and that can still be very effective. So I would say first and foremost would be change the intensity level and alter that. Second, I would say be really, really cognizant of the nutrition that we feed our bodies, both pre-workout and post-workout. So the time sensitivity is really, really important in what we give our body. For an example, one thing I wish I kind of knew, 15 years ago was after you thrash your body during a workout, it's really, really important to, give your body the nutrients that it's desiring right then and there, but understand that the effect normally takes 24 hours. So for today, for example, we're talking about Wednesday. What we eat today on Wednesday will have a direct effect on how we perform on Thursday. So it's normally like a 24-hour Rolex clock that we're talking about. So why that's important is, after you thrash yourself in the gym, or whatever the required might be physical output, it's important to give yourself the sustenance and the nutrition that's required so you can not only recover better, but you're going to be able to perform tomorrow. So that's one thing that in the past what I was guilty for was I'd thrash myself in the gym, I'd have a great workout, feel great, but then my food choice might have been suboptimal. And then what would happen is 24 hours I'd wonder why I was dragging my ass and not performing the way I could. So I would say that would be number 2. And then number 3 is try really hard to really identify when the ego gets the best of us. So we all have an ego, and we will all have to deal with that ego in one capacity or another. And another thing that I hope to share with the younger generation is when you're hurt and when you're injured, there is a time to be mentally strong and push through. And then there is a time to be intelligent and address those issues before they become chronic injuries that you may or may not have to receive a surgery to fix and rectify.
Well, here's something that touches just upon what you just said there, because what your occupation was unique in that there are times when it doesn't matter whether you're injured. The mission is X, right? And
Yeah.
you need to suck it up, push through to make sure that we complete X, right? So having said what you just said, how is it that you can know, right? Or how would you tell one of these younger guys to know what is the difference between when I have to push through this to get the job done, or, I can know that this is a time, I got to bow out here and I got to go see somebody. I got to speak to somebody. I can't do this. How do you know the difference?
Well, I think operationally that will oftentimes be dictated. So if a soldier is on the job and there's a task at hand, that's first and foremost. So that task will be completed to the best of the individual's ability. But I would say from an operational perspective, if the individual is dealing with something and he realizes that he is not performing optimally, or he is not at his best while on operation, that should be a red flag. That should be, okay, I need to, once we do have some downtime, that individual needs to take accountability for what's going on, which is real, and that's address the situation before it gets out of hand. Mm-hmm. So the onus is on the individual to recognize, there's something going on. And again, going back to controlling the ego, there's a time to be tough for sure and push through, but that's on operation. When the operation is complete, there's time during routine training that these things need to be addressed, and they should be addressed. But going back to what we talked about a few minutes ago, that's all fine and dandy when sometimes the individual understands it, he recognizes that he's trying to put something into place, but when the demand is, all right, whatever the task is or whatever the next job is, there's very finite amount of time between job 1 and job 2. Then sometimes they get stuck in a perpetual cycle of, I want to deal with this, I want to correct it, but man, now I've lost time, I've lost a window. So then what happens is the individual tends to maintain. So he's just trying to stay operationally on point, he's trying to stay as effective as possible, but he's neither growing and improving, and he's neither fixing the problems that are eventually going to become something that is going to take him out of the stack and have to get a surgery or something of that nature, where now he's laid up for potentially 6, 7, 8 months, whatever it might be. So I'm not sure if that exactly answers the question, but I think some of it is on the individual, and then some of it is on understanding what measures need to be put in place throughout the system so that individual can address the situation before it becomes out of hand.
Okay, well, here's a question now. This is a cultural question, okay?
Yeah.
Because I can tell you, as just as a military officer, right? I'm not special forces, no nothing. There is a culture, right? Physical fitness is something that is very important in the military, right? And
Yeah.
I can tell you, there is a culture where it's like nobody wants to be on a TCAT. Nobody, it's like looked at. You got to go to sick parade. It's like what?
Yeah.
Like, where are you going? So now you have these guys who are type A personality, the sharp end of the spear, and it's obviously competitive to get in to do what they want, like to be part of that team. The selection process is hard and it's competitive, right? So again, now, so when you talk about this and understanding, that they got to take care of themselves, how do we address the culture, right? Because we already have this culture where it's not really cool in the military to be injured, right? And then you got these guys that are functioning several orders above the regular personnel in the military, and you're going to say to them, but you got to, you should recognize when, you got to get help. How do we address the cultural issue then?
It's a great question. And I would say have gone through it. I've had some highs and lows due to injury that, once sustained. It took a couple of surgeries to get, my right knee fixed up, both of my shoulders fixed up. And I can tell you it was two things. It was tough to make that decision to do the surgery. And then it was also tough from a psychological perspective to bounce back after the injury, because you feel like you're a step behind. You feel like you're not, pulling your weight. You feel like you're maybe, another dimension of the individual that you used to. So what helped me when I was in a bit of a low during a recovery during an injury was I kind of looked at it like, instead of viewing what I used to do 6 or 8 months ago, I'm now creating a new, tactical athlete identity. So I'm now on the process of rebuilding to become a little bit bigger, a little bit better, a little bit stronger, but based on the foundation that is now, not what used to be, but what we have now. So I did find that mantra or that kind of mentality, it did help not only with the recovery piece, but it helped with the psyche as well. Just understanding that injuries are going to happen, especially if we don't address them when they're minor, and address them early. And whether that's, with a strengthening and conditioning program or with the assistance of, a professional physiotherapist or somebody that can recognize a potential hazard based on the way we move or the asymmetries in our body. If we can identify that early, then that's great. We can potentially avoid those injuries. But I think what we're talking about is once the injury is sustained, then what? Right? So once the injury is sustained, trying to address it as soon as possible. Of course, that's going to be, it's definitely a thought for sure. As the individual goes to bed every night, he's thinking about, man, I got to get this shoulder fixed up, or I got to get this knee fixed up. But a lot of times they're thinking, when? Like, when is their time? When can I do it? So what happens is that when question will be revisited, in some cases for months before it gets addressed. So from a cultural perspective, it is tough because the high performing, high drive guys, they don't want to take a knee. They don't want to take any time off. They don't want to miss something. They don't want to miss an opportunity to deploy and do their job. But at the same time, if you think about it long term, and what's the long game, right? So if you fix it now, and say you're a 3-year or a 4-year assaulter, if you fix it now, well, guess what? You're probably going to give some longevity to your career, and then you could be a potential 16-year, 17-year assaulter with some healthy limbs to get after it and do the job overseas.
Okay. So, and here's another question to tack onto that. When you have gone out, you've taken time out to have surgery or whatever, you're coming back, you said there's an issue, there's a little element of guilt. Am I carrying my weight? What do you think you've seen or you've experienced on the other side in terms of the group? Is there a question when someone comes back from the group saying, oh, like, is Randy good to go? Or do they trust that when you come back, it's like, no, I know what needs to be done. I've done the necessary steps. I am good to go.
Yes and no. So there's a component where when the guy recovers from injury and he's back in the stack, there's a component where the guys are happy to see him for sure. They're happy to have him back. But because it's a very competitive and a very ruthlessly, brutally honest environment, what I found is guys, they're gonna test you. They're gonna press you, and they're gonna expect you to be able to hold your own. Mm-hmm. So during routine training or in preparation for something that's coming up that all the guys need to be firing on all cylinders, there's an element of check, if you will. So the guys are going to be checking that individual because they want to make sure that he's good to go mentally, physically, but that he's going to be able to, he's got your six, right? So there's that component that's really, really important. So I would say that's twofold, both on the individual and on the team. But one thing that I've noticed, and one thing that I can speak to on experience, the team tends to be a little more forgiving and a little more open-minded to the acceptance than the individual. So in other words, the individual tends to be a lot harder on himself than the team is on the guys. Okay. But at the same time, the guys that are in the team, they want to make sure that you're good, man, because when bullets start flying or when, things get serious, they want to know that, they've got somebody that they can depend on and trust.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, which makes sense, man, because you guys are making life and death decisions split second. Now, let's switch gears a little bit, and let's still talk about injury. But say, for example, give me some insight into what your recommendations are for fitness motivation when you're sick, tired, injured, or just getting started. Okay, what are your recommendations for people then?
So there's my philosophy with training is sometimes low intensity can be, or I guess less explosive can be super intense. Mm-hmm. And then some of the movement patterns that are slow and deliberate can give you that workout where you feel like you really you put in the effort, and the strain on the body is satisfactory, but not going to break you down, right? So I guess sometimes depending on the modality of the training, slow and deliberate can be equally as intense as fast and explosive. Mm-hmm. Right? So with that, if you're just starting out, there's absolutely nothing wrong and a ton of benefit to just body weight exercises, just allowing your body to move, but putting your body maybe compromising a specific form, right? So what I'm saying by that is, without being under a heavy amount of load, we can put our feet and our knees and our hips in precarious positions, and we can go through a range of motion that would be reminiscent or realistic to what the real world might put onto us. So where I'm going with that is, in the real world, we live in Canada, we don't have the luxury to avoid every piece of black ice, for an example. So we step on that piece of black ice and our foot goes this way when we expect it to go that way. Well, if we've never put ourselves in those positions, guess what? The body has no reference point to recover from that position, and therefore oftentimes injuries are sustained because the body has never been in that position.
Never been there, exactly.
So to your point, I would say whether you're an avid fitness enthusiast where, you've been around the gym for years and years, or you're just starting out, be comfortable with being uncomfortable, but go easy and progressive to the point where you're gonna create, neural pathways between the brain and the body. So when you are in those precarious positions, it's not the first time that they've experienced them.
For sure, man. I often tell patients, gravity doesn't ask your permission before it decides to jack you up, man. It doesn't say, Randy, did you train this? Because I was thinking about making you fall right now, and I just wanted to make sure you're prepared. That never happens, right?
That's right.
So yeah, we need to, in a controlled situation, sometimes it's important to put ourselves in awkward positions so that our body says, oh yeah, I've been there. I recognize that. And I got this, right?
100%. Yeah. And I find like with the direct action training philosophy, a lot of with overall functional fitness with a combative mindset in conjunction with self-defense techniques and movement patterns are exactly that. You know, it's one thing to do, for an example, like I love jujitsu, you know, it was my first love in martial arts, but there are things with jujitsu specifically that if we don't, you know, include or add an element of surprise with regard to maybe somebody is carrying a blade or maybe somebody has a gun, that's going to change things. But if we've never trained it and we've never recognized it in training, and that happens for real on the street, there is no reference point. So of course you're going to either freeze, do absolutely nothing, or make a decision that's going to make the potential situation get worse.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah. So let's talk now, stay on the topic of injuries, but let's talk about tact in the realm of tactical operator. So we had a conversation before, but talk to us about some of the common injury patterns that you see among tactical operators.
A lot of shoulder injuries, a lot of neck injuries, some hip and knees predominantly, a little bit of ankle, a little bit of wrist, but predominantly a lot of shoulder, neck and knees. That's what I've seen a lot of. And a lot of that has to do with repetitive use. So, you know, being a shooter, you're in a position where your shoulders are often rolled forward, or if you're in free fall, you know, you're often with a, you know, a lot of strain onto the shoulder joints, the rotator cuffs in external rotation. So those are some of the common injuries where it's just repetitive overuse that doesn't necessarily get the adequate time for recovery. So a lot of knees, a lot of shoulders, a little bit of ankle, and neck as well. And with the neck, you know, like if you look at some of the guys' tactical helmets, they've got basically 20 pounds of gear hanging off their helmet at any given time, right? So you may be wearing that helmet for literally hours every day for a sustained amount of time. So that's going to take its toll on you for sure.
Okay. Now, and with, you know, thinking about the injuries, the common injuries that guys experience, now when you are training or counseling tactical operators, what are your, you know, what kinds, or what's your guidelines or the information that you're giving them with respect to their training, knowing, hey, these are the things that are frequently injured in tactical operators?
Yeah, so I think with some of the philosophy and the training advice that when people do seek out my advice, what I give them is for every one push movement, we're going to add 2 pull movements. And that's going to help kind of balance out the muscle growth in some of the areas where as men, you know, we push typically really well. We don't pull as well, which means some of those stabilizing muscles and some of those main primary movers are not as developed as some of the pushing movements. So for every exercise or every training session, I would definitely consider 2 pull movements for every 1 push movement. I would also consider an element that's going to challenge the individual's balance and spatial awareness. So, you know, being upside down, belly facing the ceiling, or vice versa, while under, you know, a level of load and trying to change direction is definitely important as well.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting, you know. I had a conversation with Matt Wenning, who you know, is a trainer in the States who trained U.S. Army Rangers, and he was again he echoed those same kind of comments, and in particular the pulling movements. He said every workout we do twice as much stuff on the back that we do on the front, because we see the front, we're great at it, we push a lot, but nobody does anything for their back. That's and right. Then you have all these guys carrying, first of all, they have to stabilize their spine carrying a crap ton of stuff. They have to change direction carrying a crap ton of stuff. And you have all these guys who have jacked up backs because they just don't ever spend time working on that.
Yeah. So yeah, underdeveloped backs and underdeveloped hamstrings. I've seen that quite a bit, and I think, you know, and I'm sure you could probably pile onto this, Chris, because I'm sure in your field you've seen exactly that, where an underfired or an underdeveloped hamstring is a direct correlation to a knee issue that probably could have been rectified, right? So, yeah, oftentimes, you know, we focus a lot on, like you said, what we can see in the mirror, but maybe not so much what we can see behind, right? So,
For sure, man.
yeah,
And there's so many guys where you know, they're very muscular and they've torn their ACL and they're like, but I work my legs, and I'm like, yeah, your quads are massive, but the relative ratio, the relative strength between your hamstring to your quads is like negligible because your hamstrings are tiny, right?
yeah,
So it's important for us to do that. So here's a question that I have for you. I talked to Pat McNamara about this
okay.
after I saw some stuff on his Instagram, which I really liked, and I think this is important. So the question is, do your intermix conditioning with fine motor skills? For example, run and gun. So first, I'll get you to answer the question, and you can explain how you do that, if you do that, and then we can talk a little bit about why I think that's important or why you think it's important.
Yes, I do 100%. And again, with the DA training philosophy, when people train with me on the range, for example, 9 times out of 10, there's going to be a movement component, which jacks up the heart rate, but also it forces us to cognitively connect with what it is that we're doing. And when it's live fire, we know the importance of having everything dialed in because of the severity of what possibly could happen if we're not paying attention. So by jacking up the heart rate and then giving the individuals a task which involves, you know, live fire engagements, what it does is it definitely connects a couple of different energy systems that are going to be activated. So at the end of that range practice, not only did you incorporate some fine motor movement skills, but you've also incorporated some gross motor movement skills, which were engaging those prime movers to get us actually moving and get the heart rate elevated. So I agree 100%. And that is part of the philosophy that I'm trying to help others with when they seek me out for training. If they're looking for back and buys on Monday and chest and tries on Tuesday, I am not that guy.
Yeah, yeah.
I am not even close to that guy. So there's lots of those guys out there, and I respect what they do, but
Yeah.
I'm not that guy.
You know, it's funny when so by no means am I a great shot. I'm not a great shot. But when I go to the range, when I first started shooting, I was all about, you know, I wanted to get the perfect trigger pull. I wanted to get the perfect grip. I want to take my time. And well, this year is a bad example. I haven't even been to the range this year. But the last time I was at the range, I like the last, you know, couple times, I've just stopped that because I think, yes, it's nice to have those skills down, but the thing is, if I'm ever in a position where I'm going to be engaging somebody with a handgun, right, that's going to be a do or die situation, and I'm not going to be sitting there like, none of that shit is happening, right? So I need to be able to deal your heart rate, 140, your fine motor skills out the freaking window, right?
Yeah.
And so I need to, if I'm going to train, I need to train in a way that's sort of somewhat similar to what I'm going to experience in real life. And if that means I have to work on getting accurate while being quick, right? And I'm not talking about being reckless. I'm just talking about not like,
Yeah.
like that is not going to happen, right? And maybe if you're dry firing at home or something like that, just to sort of get in the motor memory. But
Yeah.
I think when you're on the range, I think you do need to challenge yourself to some extent, to get yourself into a situation where, oh, this is what it's going to be like, right? And I need to figure out a way how to be smooth, not, you know, how to be smooth, how to be fast and effective, and how to be accurate, but at real world sort of speeds, you know?
Yeah.
And by no means I'm not an instructor, so I don't even know if that's right. But to me, that just seems to make sense. And I know that one of the things that we like to do when we train some of our tactical paramedics and stuff like that is we get their heart rates up, get them jacked, and then try to get them to do the skills that they're going to do. Yeah, can you run and do all this stuff? Now put in an IV line. Go do that now, right?
Yeah.
Because who knows if you're going to be running with a patient, then have to do that stuff. and you need to be able to get your heart rate down, be able to get control of your extremities, and be able to do precision work. So yeah, so I really like that kind of idea of mixing those things. Okay, so let's talk about injury prevention now.
Okay.
So when you're training, is injury prevention an integral part of your programming and training, or is that something that you see as separate?
Not separate, but secondary. So what I mean by secondary is it's definitely a thought, either pre-workout or post-workout. But I'll be completely honest, that's an area that I need to improve on myself, where if I'm pressed for time, I'm always going to do a warm-up, but if I'm pressed for time, in terms of injury prevention, one thing I need to get better at is a proper cool down and stretch phase. So I will always warm up, always give the adequate time that's required, get after the training session, whatever it might be. But I know in terms of injury prevention, probably the most important component is the cool down with the stretching component. I think that's just my philosophy. That's my point of view. Now, when I say that's one thing I need to improve on, personally speaking, that's also one thing that I help coach others with. So when they come to me and I build their program, there's always going to be time allocated for warm up, and there's always going to be time allocated for the cool down. And that's on me to impose that because they're seeking my service. Mm-hmm. And I understand how important it is for injury prevention. So it's going to be built in, if we have an hour session together, it's definitely going to be built in the front end and in the back end.
Okay. Yeah. Towards the beginning of our conversation, you talked about the utility and the importance of body weight training, but there's also it's also important to incorporate conventional weight training, or at least some people believe it is. Yep. So if you look at what you do for yourself or for your clients, what proportion of your work is based on body weight, and what proportion is based on conventional weight training, barbells, kettlebells, odd objects, whatever?
I would say one of the principles that I try to live by and promote is less about conventional versus unconventional, but more about a 70-30 principle. So the 70-30 principle essentially is we're going to dedicate 70% of our training time to work on the areas that we need improvement. But we're not going to completely ignore the stuff that we're already good at, because that's what motivates people to want to continue to train. So we dedicate 30% of our time to do those things that they like to do and that they're already really good at. Mm-hmm. So I try to break it up more in time relation than the actual movement modality or the training modality. So when I'm having an interview with somebody, I get to know them a little bit. I'm going to find out what type of person they are, what's their archetype, what's their drive, what makes them tick. And based on that, you're going to find out, things that they like or dislike. And then with the program as it's built, we try to think about the 70-30 principle. 70% of the time will be dedicated to the things that maybe need improvement that they're not really good at. And then 30% of the time, they're going to dedicate to things that they already like to do. And that's going to keep them motivated.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So if you are thinking now about optimal function, okay? And let's go optimal function for the everyday person, and then after that, optimal function for the tactical operators. What are your main areas of focus for each of those groups?
Optimal function, I would say that it's not very different. What would be different might be the level of intensity or the scaling use of force to be able to take care of business. And why I say that with so much confidence is, we're facing a world of uncertainty, and the level of violence is getting worse and worse every day. So when we're working out and we're training, my philosophy is we're training to prepare ourselves for the unknown, inevitable that could potentially happen in the street. So if you're a generalist, a general public individual, but you want to be functionally fit, then let's focus on the realities of what we're training for. Mm-hmm. And ask the person and kind of connect with them. We're like, what is your why? Where a tactical athlete, maybe their why is to be a 1%, faster, a 1%, quicker at reading the room when they enter a room under load while they're fatigued. Maybe it's a little bit faster snapshot of what's in depth so they can make those critical shoot, no shoot decisions. So I would say they're very similar in both regards, but what might be a little bit different is the level of intensity or the continuum use of force in terms of decision making on what we need to do. Why are we training, and what do we really need to do to be best prepared for the unknown variable that could be presented to us any given day of the week.
For sure. And it's interesting, like I have nothing against people who do triathlons, people who are marathon runners, like that's all well and good. But I remember saying in our conversation before, I had talked about a thing that Pat McNamara had said. He said, like, there's 4 reasons for working out, right? 1, to complete the mission, complete the task at hand. Number 2, to be able to save yourself. Number 3, to be able to save somebody else or somebody who you care and respect or love. And number 4, to kick ass. And it's like that right there, those 4 things covers the gamut of being functionally fit, right?
I agree.
Because as you said, you never know. People don't ask you and say, oh, yo, man, have you been working out? Because I was thinking of mugging you. I was thinking of, stealing your wallet. I just want to make sure that you're in shape before we get into this. That doesn't happen, right?
No.
So you need to be prepared. And yes, there are people who are fitter than hell, man. They could run forever, right? If you ask them to pick up something, lift something, you ask them to climb up something, they can't do it.
That's
and like, what is that? That, to me, that's not being fit. That's not in some respects, you have to be a generalist, right? To be able to address whatever is thrown at you, right? And you may not excel, you may not be able to run 42 kilometers, but you can run far enough, fast enough to get away from what it is that you need to, or to get to where you need to go.
100%. Like, I agree in terms of when we talk about functional fitness, it's the ability to systematically or logically come up with a solution to a potential problem that we could be faced with. So, for example, there's always going to be somebody that's bigger, stronger, faster, more athletic, smarter, more capable in whatever that might be presented to you. But if we have a solution that we can go through in terms of, all right, there's a problem that's presented to us, no problem. I'm going to look at it, come up with a logical solution, and then get after it. So, the connection between having a repertoire of skills that we can elicit when we're in a moment of stress or duress is one thing. But if you are unable to connect the skill with the condition to execute with that skill, then it's a waste. You may as well, just go for a walk, because there's no way to connect the two, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's really, really important. And a good example would be like CrossFit athletes. I'm definitely not shitting on them. They are fit individuals. But a good example I like to share with people is, on more than one occasion, I've had CrossFit athletes spar with me, and I'm a small guy, man. I'm nothing. Like, I'm not anything other than very, very good at putting a lot of things together. That's me. But the reason I share this story is because I've had CrossFit athletes who are competitors, and they are high performers, super fit. But when you put them in a scenario where different energy systems are being called upon in an MMA sparring scenario, you watch the power meter drop quickly, and you can see them self-implode, because they're now questioning their level of fitness. It's like, no, bro, you're super fit, man. It's not about you being unfit. It's about isolating or eliciting a response from a very different energy system that you didn't touch before. And now that you're touching it, your psychological mindset is overloaded and your physical output can't keep up, right? So there's a disconnect, right?
Yeah. All right. So we're getting close to the time here, but what you just said is a great opportunity to segue to my next question. We may finish up with this one, but so what are your recommendations for developing the mental aspect of fitness for tactical operators and general population clients? Because they're two different populations. And is that mental aspect different? And how so? How do you develop that?
I don't think it's different. I think everyone kind of has their own reference point, their upbringing, their background, stressors that they, may or may not have had to deal with in their life that are definitely contributing factors that can be a positive in terms of building, psychological resiliency. But in terms of the general population and a tactical athlete, how we reach in or tap into that threshold is really getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I truly believe, growth doesn't really discomfort. So whether you're working with a coach or you're self-motivated enough to put yourself in those positions physically that are legitimately physically uncomfortable, where you want that session to stop and all you're thinking about is, sitting on the couch and with your feet up and eating ding dongs and hoes or whatever the situation might be, that's the moment that the true psychological resiliency is developed. Those moments where you say, you know what? Yeah, I hurt, but fuck it. I'm going to keep going. Yeah, this sucks, but you know what? So what? Not everybody could do it. If everybody could do it, everybody would do it, right? And that's why our society, in a large part, generally speaking, are sensitive, because everybody wants the easy button. But the reality is, to get tough physically and even tougher psychologically, there is no easy button. Like, if you want to get to the penthouse where all the good stuff is, you got to take the stairs, man. And along the way, you're going to slip up a little bit and you're going to get banged up. But if you want to get to the penthouse where all the good food is, and that's where the party is, and that's where you want to be, guess what? You got to put in the effort, and you got to do things that are on full stop. There is no easy way to build the psychological resiliency.
For sure. It's funny, I was talking to a patient today. We were talking just about social media. And obviously, you're on social media. I'm on social media. It's a big part of our business and what we do. But I said, I have a love-hate relationship with social media, because everybody sees the picture they put on, all their great stuff. And it's like, oh yeah, this is me. And everybody else looks at it and they go, I want to be in the penthouse. I want to have the nice cars. Where is the easy button? And they complain because they can't get it. And I'm like, that's because there's no freaking easy button, man. It's all about you just need to put in work. You put your head down, you say, that's the mission, carry on.
That's right. 100%, man. 100%.
All right. So listen, Instagram is giving me the 2-minute timer. So I am going to allow you to finish up. And when we're done here, just hang tight on Zoom. Okay. So as we finish up, tell everybody, Randy, where they can find you, if they want to see what it is that you do, or if they want to reach out to you to, for your services. Tell them where they can connect with you.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Yeah, so Direct Action Combat Performance, the social media feeds that I predominantly monitor are Instagram. YouTube channel has Direct Action Combat Performance. YouTube channel is dedicated to this. And then if they want to hit me up with a personal email, reach out, potentially, look at doing some work together, they can reach me at randy@directactions with an S.ca. That's randy@directactions.ca. And then the social media, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube channels are all Direct Action Combat Performance.
Perfect. And I want to give a shout out to Canadian Special Forces, who is on the feed there watching us. So shout out to them. They said hello, Randy. And I also want to give a shout out to our boy Eric at Gray Fox Strategic. So if you're looking for any Kydex stuff for your firearms or firearms accessories, then you know where to go. So with that being said, we got to get off. But thank you very much, guys. We'll be back again next week, and I'll tell you early next week who the guest will be on next Wednesday. But thank you very much for tuning in. And as always, that's been a word from Dr. Chris, not your everyday ortho. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.